guest today is also someone like Dr. Christensen and Dr. Bulwer, who has lived all over and really could live anywhere in the world, but he has selected Monterey County. And we're the ones who are really, really lucky. I'm going to introduce you right now to Tom Atchison. Tom, thank you so much for being here.
Oh,
Let me
my pleasure.
say a few words about your background. It's just so incredibly impressive. He currently is the founder and chairman of the Mavericks Civilian Space Foundation, but his background expands over 25 years as an entrepreneur, technologist in Silicon Valley, and he's pioneered new technology and ventures, things that it's really hard for me to wrap my mind around: semiconductor, mobile computing, enterprise software. He's worked with healthcare, with defense, with so many different industries, and many, many companies that you have definitely heard of: Hewlett-Packard Research Labs, Eli Lilly, and he's also worked for NASA. Tom is a real rocket scientist, and that's not something everybody gets to say, that they even know a real rocket scientist. But he's also a musician, and we are going to talk about all of that. Tom is a member of our Monterey County Music for All Monterey County Action Team, and he really understands, too, the value of music education to just about everything in our lives. So welcome, Tom. Thanks for being here today.
Well, thanks for having me. It's a real pleasure, and I guess we talk a little bit about my day job, which we're never supposed to quit, right, as musicians. But that's a long story. I'm sure we'll get into all that. So why don't we get started?
It would be wonderful if you could talk just a little bit more about some of the great things that have happened with you over you've had that long space of time to be working in all these different areas. Yeah. What do you really look back on and say, these are the most exciting accomplishments for me?
Well, my favorite personal accomplishments, of course, were my early days in the music industry.
There you go.
But in terms of the day job, I got started. I mean, I was really blessed with both starting with a tremendous education in the early days of Silicon Valley in the 60s and 70s, when music and arts were an integrated part of the educational programs that were there. It wasn't an elective sort of a thing,
And it wasn't random.
No, it wasn't, and so that was very enriching, and it was also tied to a lot of pipeline programs that really allowed me to get involved in music and the arts as part of also my passion with math and science and things like that. But music became a big part of that, and that kind of led to a career opportunity in Silicon Valley, where the Silicon Valley of the early days in the 60s and 70s was kind of a lot like the area we have here around the Monterey Bay Area. It's part of the reason why I came down here. Yeah. So, I got involved with a lot of stuff, working for NASA, working for Hewlett-Packard's Research Labs, a lot of the pioneering new technologies that became the personal computer industry. But that educational program didn't just produce people like myself. It also produces people like Steve Jobs, who went to my high school, a lot of others. So I was just kind of looking for new opportunities, new ways to apply my skills, and a lot of that early music education and experience as a musician turned out to really prepare me for that. And so I was able to do everything from the airport body scanning systems you see there, and when we go through the airport today, for securing our national infrastructure, to pioneering smartphones, which everybody has, to some of the stuff that's at the Tech Museum in terms of semiconductor automation. I spent 10 years in industrial automation, plant control systems, and even took a run at trying to fix our healthcare system, but lost my shirt on that one, and I can see they're not doing too much better today as of watching television this morning, so it's a hard problem.
Definitely.
But that's just kind of a brief background on some of the things that I've been involved with.
Well, it just seems like there's so many ways in which music has helped to, when people were talking earlier today about coding and decoding, have you found that those are the kinds of things that were helping you? Like, what are the elements of the music education that you have found over the years that are so helpful? When you think, we were talking earlier about mastery and teamwork and those kinds of things, what have you really found that you draw on all the time? Right.
So I mean, my musical education and experience started at a young age. I was in elementary school, and I think probably more the mundane aspects of just becoming one with the instruments through repetitive practicing. did a lot for some of what's referred to as neuroplasticity, which is the way the brain develops at a very young age.
We think of that at an older age, the neuroplasticity. Or I have.
Well, neuroplasticity is just basically a term that's used to talk about kind of the brain and how the brain basically exercises neurons and synapses and how you're able to keep kind of your ability to remember and exercise. And we used to think that at a young age you kind of had these things, and as you got older it kind of just faded away. But it turns out that the more you use your brain, it kind of reinvigorates itself, right? And so
such good news too.
Yeah, especially at my age now. So, but so there was this practice regimen as you start as a young musician to try to learn how to kind of hold on to that plasticity in your brain. Your brain tends to clip off neural synapses, right? And as you get older, so by the time you're about 11 or 12, you've kind of got maximum brain power, and then as you don't use different aspect of these axons and synapses that are there, they get trimmed away, and over time they get reinforced. So that early exposure to music really kind of helped prevent a lot of that stuff from getting trimmed off. And so that kind of gave me a natural, I think, preparation just in terms of be able to accelerate in a broad variety of areas, not just in the arts and music, but also in science and technology and innovation. And then you combine that with the next phase, which was the pipeline aspect that I was able to participate in and then end up playing with like the Kent Orchestra and a lot of the early work that was being done by Herb Patno in the jazz entrepreneurship program or innovation programs. I was able to learn early on what the business world was like before I was in high school and I was playing with professional musicians. And so you have to learn about getting people together and coordinating teams and dealing with egos. And these are all the things you do when you start a small tech startup. Right? Sure. You have the same issues, right? So a lot of those things turned out to be skills that I put together to build a musical career, right? And then realized that I really couldn't quit my day job, and I needed to actually have a real day job, and so I went back to engineering school. And then I found myself reusing those same skills as I became an entrepreneur, and I started innovating new technologies. And so it was kind of almost a great boot camp, if you will, for innovation and creativity and starting new companies.
That's so amazing. Lots of times when people are seeing a performance or watching somebody play, they think that it's very organic and natural, and that's just that they can do it. But I think what you're talking about is that even though you've taken everything to such an extraordinary degree, that wouldn't you agree that everybody can benefit from that pathway? Everybody's brains have the opportunity to become more plastic, to become more alive, really, and as they go through that. And then again, maybe not everybody can take things to the degree of innovation that you did, but would you say that mastery and the collaboration and performance, that those are actually the kind of building blocks of innovation?
Well, it's a lot like mastering an instrument, right? First, you need to become one with the instrument. So the ideas in the head, when they happen here, they come out of the instrument there, and there's not a lot of having to think through that process, right? Then there's the creative aspect of, particularly in improvisational music, right? When you're playing with a group of folks, whether it's in a studio or a live performance, there's another communication layer that takes place, much like the same kind of communication that takes place between a technology team or an innovation team that's trying to develop a new product or things. So my experience has been that those kinds of skills of having to adapt on the fly. I mean, as a jazz musician, right? I mean, you have a fake book, so you got basically some rules of the road. You've got chord changes, you got a melody line, and then you've got the kind of the part where you interact with the other musicians, right? And so having an experience with those kind of skills were the same sorts of things that I would find happening in the tech community when I'd be involved with innovating or creating a new project. And so you learn as a musician, it's not always about yourself, but it's about the team, right? It's about the complementation between the different players, just as it is in the dynamics of a small technology company where you have different people, marketing, sales, technology, research. You have to learn to complement the others, right, and play your role as a part of the team, much as you do sitting in a musical performance with a group, whether it's a trio or quartet, or even symphonic music in the work I've done there. It's the same sort of thing. So,
we were talking with Dr. Christensen a minute ago about there's also time for critique and you have to learn how to handle that too, right? To be able to tell your teammates, well, what if you did it like this, like that? Do you think that was also helpful, like a parallel kind of thing where, you know, duke out, where are you going to do it like this, like that? You know, there's even in written music, there's opportunities for interpretation. So if you take that again into your parallel universe of the innovation and the technology sphere, there's even more opportunities for all kinds of opinions about how to do things. How do you duke that out? Did it help? Did the music help?
Yeah, I mean, you know, you deal with really bright technical people. I mean, no individual ever makes a technology happen. It's about a team. And as I've found as a CEO of companies, it's about providing leadership of a team. And usually within every musical group, there's usually somebody who kind of plays a leadership role. And it's always about dealing with people and egos and ideas and kind of making some harmony out of all of that, making it move things successfully. And so, again, the musical background just really helped me in that way of dealing with sometimes some incredibly difficult situations in the companies I've had, particularly with some of the egos that are necessary to have to make the company work, right, and make the technology happen, but also to prevent the team from basically imploding on itself. And I mean, you know, rock bands do this all the time, right? Look what happened to the Eagles, right? So, but they got back together, right? So,
So they figured it out, and one of the things that is so exciting for us nowadays is to realize that neuroscientists are really backing us up. That they're finding, you know, you were already talking about some of those elements of the way music in the brain, music really works on the brain to make it better, make it more powerful, really. And so when you think about what's happening in education now, where there's some restoration of music, but not necessarily everywhere, not necessarily for everybody, not necessarily in the exact sequential pattern that we would love to see. What would you say to people who are really eager for Monterey County to be a real source of this innovation? You know, we talk about in different economic development circles, talk about Monterey County being a beautiful, wonderful, inspiring, creative place. That should have help us to be really a great source of gravity for people who are going to be very innovative in a lot of the spheres that you've talked about. How important is it to you that as somebody who is really a leader in all of that, to know that or to support that that music be really very sequential, very strong, and for everybody in Monterey County to help us achieve that dream of being one of the centers of gravity for innovation in the future.
Right. So, so a couple things there. So let me see if I can deconstruct. But I think I understand kind of what you're asking about. So, you know, from my standpoint, I think a lot of the success that I've had has been a direct result of the educational programs that were a core part of the educational curriculum, both in primary and secondary schools. I mean, it wasn't elective. It was even mandated by my mother, right? I mean, it's like I didn't have a choice. And that's, I mean, it's the hard part as a musician when you first start is because nobody likes to practice, right? But you need to do that to get connected with the instrument. But it's not just enough to go through the practice aspects, which is really important in early child development and the development of the brain and kind of the management of these neural synapses so that the brain remains fully developed. But then there becomes the aspect of exercising that. And so the pipelines that really started in the middle school levels that were tied. So you had a middle school program that started the performance side of music rather than just the practice, and the public exposure, getting children at a young age exposed to a public environment, getting up in front of large groups of people and performing, and then tying that opportunity to expand in music in terms of theory, in terms of jazz education, because I became a jazz musician, which was very passionate, but people also go to classical music, which is just as fine. And I think you can get both aspects there in terms of the performance, and then tying that into the professional community so you can learn about the business side of music, right? So it's kind of an early entrepreneurship opportunity for me just as being a musician, right? And so you've got that's going on in terms of the value of an educational pipeline, and I think we've lost that in most of our educational systems out of this perspective of focusing just directly on the result, right? Which is we want to drive innovation, we want it to happen, and we want to do it by focusing on science and math and engineering and technology. But the undercurrent, I mean, the science and the math aspect is really more about discovery of knowledge and containment of knowledge and applying mathematical models, which apply as well in music.
Yeah.
But it's the technology side and the technology development that is really the creative artistry, if you would, within the tech industry, right?
Yeah.
And then, of course, the engineering side is actually basically bringing that to the masses, right? Making it economically practical for society. So you say all of that, and how does that tie then in kind of some of the economic items that are going on in the Monterey Peninsula here, and kind of like my moving down here, and also about the neural development. So what's going on in technology right now is we're all kind of familiar with this business of Moore's Law, which basically the cost of technologies is dropping in half about every 18 months. And the idea was, well, this was going to eventually limit out and end out after semiconductors reach some sort of wall. But what we're finding out is not only, there's a new law called Rose's Law that extends beyond that as we're moving to quantum machines. Right? And as we move to quantum-based machines from Van Neumann architectures, we start to see that this is not just a short-term trend with semiconductors, but this is going to continue to accelerate. And also, when you look at the visibility, it goes back to mechanical computers before semiconductors, all the way back to the 1900s. And so you can see that there's this accelerating trend in technology that's moving forward.
It feels that way.
Right. And so as we start to get the smaller densities and the increased processing power, we start to approach neural capabilities, right? In other words, we're starting to get to the point where we've got machines that are equivalent to a human brain, and shortly we'll have the processing capacities beyond human capabilities, and that is continuing to accelerate. So now, the next wave of what's coming in terms of technology and the way it's going to impact economies is we're starting to see machines replacing the mundane sort of things that humans do, the kind of the drudgery work that's out there. And we're starting to talk about the impacts of artificial intelligence and, more importantly, machine learning, and allowing us to be able to do things in ways that humans just can't. And so you're seeing it from self-driving cars to self-flying airplanes, vision recognition systems. And when you think about the Monterey County and the area around us here, with our focus in hospitality and agriculture, right, as well as education, these things are going to start to really be impacted by this new wave that's coming. And as we're studying more and more about how to get machines to think like people, we're also understanding more and more about the human brain and how it works and how it develops. And the big question we're going to have is, if we have machines doing a lot of this stuff, what are people going to do?
All the fun stuff?
Yeah, well, I mean, things like you don't have to drive your car. I mean, I go up to Tahoe. It's a 4 or 5 hour drive. I have a lot of other things I'd rather do than operate a steering wheel. Right. I mean, I'd like to just push the button and maybe read a book and maybe learn some new classes. And so education becomes the new entertainment, right? And that has a big impact on hospitality, right? And we're a big hospitality community around here. But the hospitality community is going through a new revolution with this, because people want more than a meal and a nice place to stay, right? And kind of pretty landscapes. They want to get involved in their vacations. They want to have new experiences. These are all educational opportunities. So all of this stuff is going to impact hospitality. What's going on in agriculture is going to be quite revolutionary, both in terms of how we grow foods in the field, but also in vertical agriculture and what we can do there. All of it being driven by machine learning and these kinds of technologies. So we're going to be impacted by that. But we've got to have the people. We've got to have the resources here, the fabric with which to drive those evolutions and changes in our industrial base so our economy thrives.
And also, we need to be able to be more flexible. That neuroplasticity again.
Right.
We have to be able to adapt and move ahead of that, right?
Right. Yeah. Because one of the big challenges we have going on out there is the rate with everything is changing is exceeding our biological abilities to adapt. So we need to hold on to as much of that brain power as possible.
And we can do it through music, right?
Absolutely. I was just going to say, musical programs are great opportunities to be able to do that, but we also have to have it in our educational systems so we have people prepared to do that, right?
So that's exactly our story. So thank you so much for being with us today, and please join us at artsformc.org any day, and especially about music, it's artsformc.org/music.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Did you know that every time musicians pick up their instruments, there are fireworks going off all over their brain? On the outside, they may look calm and focused, reading the music and making the precise and practiced movements required. But inside their brains, there's a party going on. How do we know this? Well, in the last few decades, neuroscientists have made enormous breakthroughs in understanding how our brains work by monitoring them in real time with instruments like fMRI and PET scanners. When people are hooked up to these machines, tasks such as reading or doing math problems each have corresponding areas of the brain where activity can be observed. But when researchers got the participants to listen to music, they saw fireworks. Multiple areas of their brains were lighting up at once as they processed the sound, took it apart to understand elements like melody and rhythm, and then put it all back together into unified musical experience. And our brains do all this work in the split second between when we first hear the music and when our foot starts to tap along. But when scientists turn from observing the brains of music listeners to those of musicians, the little backyard fireworks became a jubilee. It turns out that while listening to music engages the brain in some pretty interesting activities, playing music is the brain's equivalent of a full-body workout. The neuroscientists saw multiple areas of the brain light up, simultaneously processing different information in intricate, interrelated, and astonishingly fast sequences. But what is it about making music that sets the brain alight? The research is still fairly new, but neuroscientists have a pretty good idea. Playing a musical instrument engages practically every area of the brain at once, especially the visual, auditory, and motor cortices. And as with any other workout, disciplined, structured practice in playing music strengthens those brain functions, allowing us to apply that strength to other activities. The most obvious difference between listening to music and playing it is that the latter requires fine motor skills, which are controlled in both hemispheres of the brain. It also combines the linguistic and mathematical precision in which the left hemisphere is more involved, with the novel and creative content that the right excels in. For these reasons, playing music has been found to increase the volume and activity in the brain's corpus callosum, the bridge between the two hemispheres, allowing messages to get across the brain faster and through more diverse routes. This may allow musicians to solve problems more effectively and creatively in both academic and social settings. Because making music also involves crafting and understanding its emotional content and message, musicians often have higher levels of executive function, a category of interlinked tasks that includes planning, strategizing, and attention to detail, and requires simultaneous analysis of both cognitive and emotional aspects. This ability also has an impact on how our memory systems work. And indeed, musicians exhibit enhanced memory functions, creating, storing, and retrieving memories more quickly and efficiently. Studies have found that musicians appear to use their highly connected brains to give each memory multiple tags, such as a conceptual tag, an emotional tag, an audio tag, and a contextual tag, like a good internet search engine. So how do we know that all these benefits are unique to music, as opposed to, say, sports or painting? Or could it be that people who go into music were already smarter to begin with? Neuroscientists have explored these issues, but so far they have found that the artistic and aesthetic aspects of learning to play a musical instrument are different from any other activity studied, including other arts. And several randomized studies of participants who showed the same levels of cognitive function and neural processing at the start found that those who were exposed to a period of music learning showed enhancement in multiple brain areas compared to the others. This recent research about the mental benefits of playing music has advanced our understanding of mental function, revealing the inner rhythms and complex interplay that make up the amazing orchestra of our brain.